Hello and welcome to Stories Before Sleep. I want to tell you something. There's this story about a woman named Cleopatra. Now you probably think you know who she is. You've heard the name before. You might picture someone beautiful, someone who seduced powerful men, someone who lived in luxury in ancient Egypt. That's what most people think. But that's not really her story, not the real one. Her story is about something much deeper. It's about a person who was born into chaos, rejected by her own family, forced into exile, and somehow found her way back to power through pure intelligence and strategy. It's about a woman who spoke 9 languages, who understood mathematics and astronomy, who could negotiate with generals and senators. It's about someone who used her mind as her greatest weapon, and I think you should hear it, especially now as you're settling in for the night. Because Cleopatra's story isn't just about ancient Egypt. It's about what happens when someone refuses to accept the hand they've been dealt. It's about resilience. It's about the kind of strength that doesn't come from being born into privilege, but from choosing to fight for yourself. So let me take you back. Back to Alexandria, Egypt. Back to a time when the world was very different, but human struggles were exactly the same. Back to where it all began. Let me take you back to the beginning. Back to Alexandria, Egypt. Back to around 69 BCE. A girl is born into one of the most powerful families in the ancient world. Her name is Cleopatra. She's the daughter of Ptolemy III and the king of Egypt. And from the moment she enters the world, everything about her life is complicated. You see, the Ptolemaic dynasty wasn't Egyptian. That's important to understand. The Ptolemies were Greek. They were descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals. When Alexander died, his empire was divided among his generals, and Egypt fell to Ptolemy III. For nearly 300 years, the Ptolemies had ruled Egypt. But by the time our Cleopatra was born, the dynasty was in serious trouble. Egypt was wealthy. That part was true. The Nile River provided fertile land for crops. Trade routes brought riches from across the Mediterranean and beyond. But wealth alone doesn't keep a kingdom stable. You need strong leadership. You need unity. You need people who are willing to work together for the good of the nation. The Ptolemaic family had none of those things. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy III, was a weak ruler. He was known as the flute player because he spent more time playing music and enjoying pleasures than he did governing. While he played his flute, Egypt's power was slipping away. Rome was growing stronger. Other kingdoms were becoming more assertive. Egypt was losing its influence in the Mediterranean world, and the family itself was a disaster. The Ptolemies had a tradition of marrying within the family. Brothers married sisters. Cousins married cousins. This was supposed to keep the bloodline pure and the power concentrated. But what it actually did was create generations of dysfunction, mental illness, and bitter rivalries. It created families where trust was impossible and betrayal was expected. Cleopatra had siblings. She had brothers and sisters. But they weren't her allies. They were her rivals. In the Ptolemaic system, power was supposed to be shared among family members. But in reality, it was constantly being fought over. Every sibling was a potential threat. Every family member was a potential enemy. She felt the tension in the palace. She felt the awareness that her family was not like other families. She felt the knowledge that love and loyalty were luxuries her family couldn't afford. She felt the constant undercurrent of danger that came from living in a place where your own relatives might turn against you at any moment. She knew, my family is powerful, but we are not united. My father is weak. My siblings are rivals. And I am a girl in a world where girls are not supposed to have power. I am an outsider in my own family, and I need to understand why. When Cleopatra was around 9 years old, her father died. Ptolemy XIII passed away, leaving behind a kingdom in chaos and a family in turmoil. According to his will, the throne was supposed to pass to his eldest son, Ptolemy XIII. But Cleopatra was supposed to rule alongside him. They were supposed to share power. They were supposed to be partners in governing Egypt. But that's not what happened. Ptolemy XIII was only about 10 years old when he became king. He was too young to rule alone. So there needed to be a regent, someone to guide him, and make decisions until he was old enough to rule on his own. And here's where the real problem began. The men around Ptolemy XIII, his advisors, his guardians, the powerful nobles who controlled the government, they didn't want to share power with a girl. Cleopatra was intelligent. She was educated. She spoke multiple languages. She understood politics and strategy. But none of that mattered. She was a woman. And in the ancient world, women weren't supposed to rule. They were supposed to be decorative. They were supposed to produce heirs. They were supposed to do what the men told them to do. The advisors around Ptolemy XIII, when they began to marginalize her, they excluded her from important decisions. They reduced her authority. They made it clear that she was not welcome in the halls of power. She was the rightful queen, but she was being treated like an outsider. She felt the sting of rejection. She felt the humiliation of being pushed aside. She felt the anger of knowing that she was being treated unfairly simply because she was a woman. She felt the fear of what would happen if she didn't find a way to assert herself. She knew, I am being pushed out. The men around my brother are taking power that should be mine. They are treating me as if I don't matter. But I do matter. I am the daughter of a pharaoh. I am educated and intelligent. I understand Egypt better than most of the men who are now in power. And I will not accept being erased from my own kingdom. But knowing something and being able to do something about it are two very different things. Cleopatra was a young woman in a male-dominated world. She had no army. She had no official power. She had only her intelligence and her determination. And those things, while valuable, were not enough to fight against the combined power of the men who controlled her brother's government. So she watched. She learned. She paid attention to everything that was happening around her. She observed how power worked. She saw which advisors had influence over her brother. She understood the political landscape. She was preparing herself even though she didn't yet know for what. And then around 48 BCE, when Cleopatra was in her early 20s, the situation came to a head. The advisors around Ptolemy XIII decided that they didn't want to share power with her anymore. They didn't want her to have any authority at all. They forced her out. They stripped her of her titles. They exiled her from Alexandria. She felt the shock of it. She felt the moment when everything changed. She felt the realization that she had been right to fear. She felt the knowledge that her own family, her own brother, had turned against her. She knew, this is it. This is the moment I've been dreading. I have been pushed out of my own kingdom. I have been exiled by my own family. I have lost everything. But I also know something else. I know that I am not finished. I know that I am stronger than this. I know that I will find a way back, because I am a daughter of Egypt. I am a pharaoh, and I will not accept defeat. And with that realization, Cleopatra's real journey began. The girl who wasn't supposed to rule was about to become a woman who would do whatever it took to reclaim her throne. Let me take you back to a moment that changed everything for Cleopatra. It's around 48 BCE. And she's not much older than a teenager. She's been queen for only a few years, ruling alongside her younger brother Ptolemy III. But here's the thing about ruling with a brother in ancient Egypt. It was never meant to be equal. The men around Ptolemy, his advisors, they didn't want to share power with a woman. They wanted total control. So they made their move. They forced her out. They stripped her of her title, took her throne, and basically told her to disappear. Can you imagine that one day you're the queen of one of the richest, most powerful nations in the world? The next day, you're nobody. You're exiled. You're running for your life. Cleopatra didn't have an army. She didn't have money. She didn't have supporters in the capital. What she had was her mind, her determination, and a burning question that wouldn't leave her alone. How do I get back? She fled Alexandria. She went into hiding in Syria in the desert regions beyond Egypt's borders. And during those years, and I want you to really think about this, during those years of exile, she didn't waste time feeling sorry for herself. She studied. She learned. She planned. She was already fluent in Egyptian, Greek, and Aramaic. But she didn't stop there. She learned Latin, Hebrew, Median, Parthian, and several other languages. Why? Because she understood something fundamental about power. Power isn't just about armies and money. It's about communication. It's about being able to speak to people in their own language, literally and figuratively. It's about understanding how different cultures think, what they value, what they fear. She also studied mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and rhetoric. She learned the art of diplomacy by observing the political landscape around her. She made connections with people who still believed in her, who remembered that she was the rightful queen. She was building a network, brick by brick, connection by connection. Think about what was happening inside her during those years. She felt the sting of betrayal, the humiliation of being cast aside, the fear that she might never get back. But underneath all of that, there was something else. There was a fire, a determination that refused to be extinguished. She knew, I am smarter than the men who took my throne. I am more educated. I understand more languages. I can see further ahead than they can, and I will find a way back. In that moment of exile, surrounded by uncertainty, facing the very real possibility that she might never rule again, Cleopatra made a decision. She decided that she wouldn't be a victim of circumstance. She decided that her exile would become her education. Every year she spent away from Alexandria, she was becoming stronger, sharper, more prepared. There's a moment that historians believe was crucial. It's when she realized that she couldn't take back Egypt alone. She needed an ally. She needed someone powerful enough to challenge her brother, someone who had the military strength she lacked. And she knew exactly where to find such a person. Julius Caesar was coming to Egypt. The most powerful man in Rome was arriving in Alexandria to settle a dispute. And Cleopatra understood something that most people missed. This wasn't just a problem to be solved. This was an opportunity. This was her moment. She felt a mixture of hope and terror. She knew the risks. If she failed, if Caesar rejected her, if he sided with her brother, she would lose everything. But if she succeeded, if she could convince Caesar to support her claim, she could reclaim her throne. In that moment, she realized, I have spent years preparing for this. I have learned the languages so I could speak to leaders from different lands. I have studied diplomacy so I could understand how power works. I have built relationships so I would have support when I needed it. And now the moment is here. I cannot hesitate. I cannot doubt myself. I have to be brave enough to take this chance. She didn't have an army. She didn't have the traditional tools of power, but she had something more valuable. She had intelligence. She had preparation. She had a clear vision of what she wanted and why she deserved it. She had spent years in exile transforming herself from a girl who was forced from her throne into a woman who was ready to fight for it. And that's the thing about exile that people often miss. It can break you, or it can forge you. It can make you bitter, or it can make you brilliant. For Cleopatra, those years away from power weren't a punishment. They were a masterclass. They were the education that would prepare her for everything that came next. She was ready. The fire inside her had been burning for years, waiting for this moment. And when the opportunity finally came, she would be prepared to seize it with both hands. She would use every skill she had learned, every connection she had made, every moment of preparation to reclaim what was hers. That's the moment the real Cleopatra emerged. Not the woman of legend, but the woman of strategy, the woman of intellect, the woman who refused to accept defeat. It's 48 BCE. Julius Caesar has just arrived in Alexandria, and the city is in turmoil. Cleopatra's brother controls the government, controls the army, controls the narrative. Caesar is here ostensibly to settle a dispute between the siblings, but really he's here because Egypt is wealthy, strategically important, and he wants to make sure Rome's interests are protected. Cleopatra is still in exile. She's outside the city, watching, waiting, planning. And she knows she has one chance. Just one. If she can get in front of Caesar, if she can make an impression, if she can convince him that she's the better choice to rule Egypt, everything changes. If she fails, she loses everything. So she makes a decision that would become legendary. She decides to go to Caesar. But she can't just walk through the front door of his quarters. Her brother's guards would stop her. She'd be arrested, probably executed. So she does something bold, something that shows you exactly how her mind worked. She has herself rolled up in a carpet, or according to some accounts, a laundry sack. The exact details don't really matter. What matters is the strategy behind it. She's getting past the guards. She's getting into Caesar's private chambers. And she's doing it in a way that shows confidence, creativity, and a willingness to take enormous personal risk. When the carpet is unrolled, Caesar sees a young woman emerge. She's probably around 21 years old. She's dressed in royal garments. She's composed. She's intelligent. And she's standing in front of the most powerful man in Rome, having just taken an incredible gamble to get there. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Most people think this moment was about seduction. They think Cleopatra used her beauty to charm Caesar. And yes, she was beautiful. But that's not what actually happened. That's the legend. The reality was far more sophisticated. She spoke to him in Latin. She spoke to him as an equal. She explained her case. She told him why she was the rightful queen. She explained the political situation in Egypt. She demonstrated her knowledge, her intelligence, her understanding of governance. She showed him that she wasn't just a beautiful woman seeking help. She was a capable leader seeking an alliance. Caesar was impressed, not just by her appearance, but by her mind. He was a man who valued intelligence and strategy. He recognized those qualities in her. And he understood something important: Cleopatra would be a better ally for Rome than her brother. She was educated. She was sophisticated. She understood the wider world. She could be trusted to maintain Egypt's stability and Rome's interests. But there was also a personal connection. Caesar was in his early 50s. Cleopatra was in her early 20s. They were attracted to each other. And that attraction, that genuine connection, became part of their alliance. It wasn't fake. It wasn't purely calculated. But it also wasn't the whole story. The political strategy came first. The personal relationship reinforced it. She felt the weight of everything resting on this moment. She felt fear, real, genuine fear. What if he rejected her? What if he sent her away? What if she had risked everything for nothing? But underneath the fear was something else. She felt the clarity of knowing exactly what she needed to do and the confidence that she could do it. She knew this man respects intelligence. He respects courage. He respects strategy. I have all three. I need to show him that I'm not asking for charity. I'm offering him a partnership. I'm offering him a queen who understands power, who can maintain stability in Egypt, who can be an asset to Rome. I need to make him see that supporting me isn't just the right choice politically. It's the smart choice. In that moment, standing in front of Caesar, Cleopatra made a calculated risk. She risked her life to get into that room. She risked her pride by appealing for help. She risked her future by putting all her hopes on one man's decision. But she did it with full awareness of what she was doing. She wasn't desperate. She was strategic. And here's what's crucial to understand. She didn't seduce Caesar into helping her. She convinced him. She made a case. She demonstrated that she was worth supporting. The relationship that developed between them was real, but it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and political alignment. Caesar wanted to help her because it made sense, because she was the better choice for Egypt, because she was intelligent enough to be a reliable ally. Over the following months, Caesar supported her claim to the throne. He provided military support. He helped her defeat her brother's forces. And in doing so, he helped her reclaim what was rightfully hers. But think about what this moment reveals about Cleopatra. She didn't have an army. She didn't have money. She didn't have official power. What she had was her mind. She had the ability to assess a situation, to understand what someone else wanted, to present herself in a way that was both authentic and strategic. She had the courage to take enormous risks. She had the intelligence to know that the best way to influence a powerful man wasn't through manipulation, but through genuine connection and clear thinking. This is the moment when Cleopatra stopped being a girl who was forced from her throne. She became a woman who reclaimed it. Not through violence, though violence would come later, but through intelligence, through strategy, through the sheer force of her personality and her mind. And as you're lying there thinking about this moment, I want you to understand something. This wasn't luck. This wasn't just beauty. This was preparation, meeting opportunity. This was years of study, years of planning, years of building herself into someone capable of seizing a moment when it came. This was what happens when someone refuses to accept defeat. With Caesar's support, Cleopatra's brother was defeated. By 47 BCE, she was back on the throne of Egypt. But here's the thing that most people don't understand about reclaiming power. It's not the same as keeping it. Getting back was one thing. Staying there was something entirely different. She faced an enormous challenge. Her people had been without her for years. They'd been ruled by her brother, by his advisors, by people who had made decisions that weakened Egypt. The economy was struggling. There was resentment. There was uncertainty. And now a woman was back in power, and she'd gotten there with the help of a foreign general. Some people saw that as a weakness. Some people questioned whether she was truly Egyptian, truly loyal to her own people, or just a puppet of Rome. Cleopatra understood all of this. She knew that having Caesar's military support wasn't enough. She needed legitimacy. She needed her people to believe in her. She needed to prove that she was a capable ruler, not just someone who'd been handed power by a Roman general. So she did something brilliant. She had a son with Caesar. His name was Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. Now, on the surface, this might seem like a personal choice, a romantic decision. But politically, it was genius. Here's why in Egyptian tradition, the pharaoh was considered a god. The son of a pharaoh was divine. By having Caesar's son, Cleopatra created a direct line of succession. She created a child who was both Egyptian royalty and Roman nobility. She created a symbol of the alliance between Egypt and Rome. But more than that, she was making a statement to her people. She was saying, I am not just a woman ruling alone. I am the mother of the next pharaoh. I am the link between the old Egypt and the new Egypt. I am the one who will secure Egypt's future. She felt the weight of motherhood combined with the weight of rulership. She felt the responsibility of knowing that her son's life, her son's future was now tied to her political survival. She knew that having a child with Caesar made her more vulnerable in some ways. If Caesar turned against her, if Rome decided to take Egypt, her son could be used against her. But she also knew that it made her stronger. It gave her leverage. It gave her legitimacy. She knew, I must be the best ruler Egypt has ever had, not just for myself, for my son, for his future, for Egypt's future. I cannot afford to fail. I cannot afford to show weakness. Every decision I make now affects not just my reign, but the dynasty I'm building. She threw herself into the work of ruling. She traveled throughout Egypt showing herself to her people. She made sure they saw her as a strong leader, not a puppet. She made decisions that benefited Egypt, even when those decisions were difficult. She invested in agriculture, in trade, in infrastructure. She worked to restore Egypt's economy, which had been damaged by years of civil conflict. She also made a crucial decision about her brother. After his defeat, he was still technically co-ruler. But Cleopatra couldn't have a rival on the throne. So she married her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, as was the custom in the Ptolemaic dynasty. And then within a few years he died. Most historians believe she had him killed, though the exact circumstances are unclear. It was a ruthless decision, but it was also a necessary one. She couldn't share power. She couldn't have a rival who might challenge her authority. This is where Cleopatra's story gets complicated. She wasn't just a brilliant strategist and a capable ruler. She was also willing to do whatever it took to maintain power. She was willing to eliminate threats. She was willing to make hard choices that most people couldn't make, and that's an important part of understanding her. She wasn't a saint. She was a political operator. But here's the thing, she operated in a world where that was necessary. She was a woman in a male-dominated world. She had to be harder, smarter, more ruthless than the men around her. She had to eliminate threats before they eliminated her. That was the reality of ancient politics. As she ruled, she worked carefully to balance her relationship with Rome. Caesar was her ally, but he was also a foreign power. She needed Rome's support, but she couldn't let Rome control Egypt. She needed to maintain Egypt's independence, while also maintaining the alliance that kept her safe. She felt the constant tension of this balance. She felt the fear that one wrong move could upset everything. She felt the exhaustion of having to be perfect, having to be brilliant, having to be strong every single day. She knew, I am not just ruling a country. I am managing a relationship with the most powerful nation in the world. I am protecting my son's future. I am trying to restore Egypt to its former glory. And I am doing all of this while being a woman in a world that doesn't believe women should have power. I cannot rest. I cannot show doubt. I cannot fail. And she didn't fail. Under her rule, Egypt began to recover. Trade increased. The economy stabilized. Her people began to see her not as the girl who'd been exiled, but as a capable pharaoh. She was building something. She was creating a legacy. But then in 44 BCE, everything changed. Caesar was assassinated in Rome. Brutus and other senators stabbed him to death. And suddenly Cleopatra's most powerful ally was gone. She was vulnerable again. She had a young son whose father was dead. She had enemies who saw her as weak. She had a world that was about to descend into chaos. She felt the shock of loss. She felt the fear of what came next. She felt the weight of knowing that she had to survive this, had to protect her son, had to navigate a new and dangerous political landscape. In that moment, she realized, everything I've built could crumble, but I will not let it. I have survived exile. I have reclaimed my throne. I have built something real, and I will find a way through this. I always do. The death of Caesar sent shockwaves through the ancient world. Rome descended into chaos. There were factions fighting for power. There were armies immobilizing. There was uncertainty everywhere. And Cleopatra, thousands of miles away in Alexandria, was watching it all unfold, knowing that her fate was tied to Rome's instability. She was a widow now, though she and Caesar had never been officially married. She had a young son, Caesarion, who was only a few years old. She had enemies who saw her as vulnerable. She had a kingdom that depended on her strength and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics. For a while, she tried to stay neutral. She tried to maintain relationships with the different factions in Rome, tried to keep Egypt safe by not committing too strongly to any one side. But neutrality in a civil war is almost impossible. Eventually, you have to choose. Eventually, you have to pick a side. She felt the weight of impossible choices. She felt the grief of losing Caesar, who had been not just an ally, but someone she genuinely cared about. She felt the fear of what would happen to her son if she made the wrong decision. She felt the exhaustion of having to be strategic when all she wanted to do was mourn. She knew, I cannot afford the luxury of grief. I cannot sit with my pain and process it. I have to think. I have to plan. I have to survive. My son's life depends on it. Egypt's future depends on it. I have to be strong even when I'm breaking inside. This is the reality of being a powerful woman in the ancient world. You don't get to have normal emotions. You don't get to be vulnerable. You have to keep moving. You have to keep thinking. You have to keep fighting. Then in 41 BCE, Mark Antony came into her life. Antony was one of the most powerful men in Rome. He was a military general, a politician, and one of the 3 men who now controlled Rome after Caesar's death. He was also known for his charisma, his intelligence, and his appreciation for beauty and culture. Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus in what is now Turkey. He wanted to discuss Egypt's allegiance. He wanted to make sure that Cleopatra would support him in the ongoing struggle for power in Rome. And Cleopatra knew that this meeting was crucial. This was another moment where everything could change. So she prepared carefully. She dressed in royal garments. She traveled on a magnificent barge with golden sails. She arrived with ceremony and grandeur. And when she met Antony, she made an impression that would echo through history. But here's what's important to understand. Cleopatra didn't just seduce Antony. That's the legend. The reality was more complex. She and Antony genuinely connected. They shared interests. They both appreciated art, culture, philosophy, and intellectual conversation. They were attracted to each other, yes, but it was more than just physical attraction. She felt something different with Antony than she had felt with Caesar. With Caesar, it had been strategic, though genuine. With Antony, there was a personal element that felt more real, more immediate. She felt the possibility of a partnership that was both political and personal. She felt the hope that maybe she could have both power and love. She knew, this man understands me in a way that others don't. He appreciates my intelligence. He respects my authority. He sees me as an equal, not just as a woman to be conquered. But I also know that this is still a political alliance. I cannot forget that. I cannot let emotion cloud my judgment. I have to be strategic even as I'm being genuine. Over the following years, Cleopatra and Antony's relationship deepened. They had children together, twins, and later, another son. They became partners in the truest sense. Antony supported her rule in Egypt. Cleopatra provided resources and support for Antony's military campaigns. They were building something together, but it was also a relationship built on the shifting sands of Roman politics. Antony was fighting for control of Rome against Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir. Octavian was ruthless, ambitious, and determined to consolidate power. He saw Antony as a rival. He saw Cleopatra as a threat. Cleopatra threw her support behind Antony. She provided him with ships, with soldiers, with resources. She believed in him. She believed that together they could build something great. She believed that Antony could defeat Octavian, and that she and Antony could create a new order in the Mediterranean. She felt the intoxication of believing in something larger than herself. She felt the joy of having found someone who understood her, who respected her, who wanted to build a future with her. She felt the confidence that came from having both love and power aligned in the same direction. But she also felt the creeping doubt. She felt the awareness that Antony was not as disciplined as Caesar had been. She felt the concern that his judgment was sometimes clouded by emotion, by ambition, by the desire to prove himself. She felt the fear that his weaknesses might become her vulnerabilities. She knew, I love this man, but I cannot let love make me blind. I cannot let emotion override strategy. I have to keep my eyes open. I have to be ready for anything. Because in this world, love and power are always in tension, and I cannot afford to lose either one. The relationship between Cleopatra and Antony was one of history's great love stories. But it was also one of history's great political alliances. And the two were so intertwined that it's impossible to separate them. She loved him. She also needed him. She supported him because she believed in him. She also supported him because it was strategically necessary. This is what made Cleopatra different from many other women in power. She didn't have to choose between love and strategy. She found a way to have both. She found a man who could be both a genuine partner and a political ally. And for a time it worked. But the world was changing. Octavian was growing stronger. Rome was consolidating under his control. And the alliance between Cleopatra and Antony, no matter how strong, was about to face its greatest test. By the late 30s BCE, the situation in Rome had become increasingly tense. Octavian controlled the western part of the Roman world. Antony controlled the east, and between them there was growing hostility. War was coming. Everyone could feel it. It was only a matter of time. Cleopatra understood that Egypt couldn't survive if Antony fell. If Octavian defeated Antony and took control of the entire Roman world, Egypt would become nothing more than a province of Rome. Her independence would be gone. Her power would be gone. Everything she had built would be absorbed into Octavian's empire. So she and Antony began to build a coalition. They reached out to other rulers in the Eastern Mediterranean. They built alliances with kings and queens, who also feared Octavian's ambitions. They were creating a counterweight to Roman power, a united Eastern alliance that could stand against the West. And then, in 34 BCE, Cleopatra and Antony did something extraordinary. They held a ceremony in Alexandria that would become known as the Donations of Alexandria. It was a public spectacle, a grand announcement of their vision for the future. Antony stood before the people of Alexandria and made proclamations. He declared that Cleopatra's children would rule over vast territories. Her eldest son with Caesarion would rule Egypt and Cyprus. Her twins would rule Syria and Cilicia. Her youngest son would rule Armenia and Parthia. It was a remarkable redistribution of power, a vision of an Eastern empire ruled by Cleopatra's family with Antony as the military and political force behind it. The ceremony was brilliant theater. It was also brilliant politics. Cleopatra was positioning herself and her children as the future rulers of the East. She was creating a dynasty. She was showing her people and the world that she had ambitions that extended far beyond Egypt's borders. But here's what's crucial to understand. This wasn't just Cleopatra's ambition. This was a shared vision with Antony. They were partners in this. They were building something together. They were imagining a world where the East could stand independent from Rome, where Cleopatra's family would rule, where Egyptian culture and values would be preserved and expanded. She felt the exhilaration of seeing her vision taking shape. She felt the pride of knowing that her children would inherit not just Egypt, but an empire. She felt the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could succeed. That maybe they could create something that would last, but she also felt the weight of what she was risking. She felt the awareness that this ceremony, this public declaration of ambition, was a direct challenge to Octavian. She felt the knowledge that she was crossing a line, that she was making herself and Antony into targets. She knew, this is the moment. This is when we commit fully. This is when we say to the world we are not going to accept Octavian's dominance. We are not going to let Rome absorb the East. We are going to build something different, something better. But I also know the cost. I know that Octavian will see this as a threat. I know that war is coming. And I know that everything I have, everything I've built, everything my children will inherit is now at stake. The Donations of Alexandria ceremony had the exact effect that Cleopatra feared. Octavian was furious. He saw it as a direct challenge to Roman authority. He saw it as Cleopatra and Antony carving up the world without Rome's permission. He began to prepare for war. But before the war came, Cleopatra had to make another crucial decision. She had to decide how far she was willing to go. She had to decide whether she was willing to risk everything for this vision of an Eastern empire. She made the decision to commit fully. She provided Antony with ships, with soldiers, with resources. She mortgaged Egypt's wealth to fund his military campaigns. She was betting everything on Antony's ability to defeat Octavian. She was betting everything on her vision of the East. She felt the fear of what she was doing. She felt the awareness that if this failed, if Antony was defeated, she would have bankrupted Egypt. She would have left her children vulnerable. She would have destroyed everything she had worked so hard to build. But she also felt the conviction that this was the right choice. She felt the belief that Antony could win. She felt the determination that she would not go down without a fight. She felt the refusal to accept a future where Egypt was just another Roman province. She knew, I am risking everything. My wealth, my power, my children's future. But I am also fighting for something that matters. I am fighting for Egypt's independence. I am fighting for the possibility of a world where the East is not dominated by Rome. I am fighting for my vision of what could be. And I cannot do that without taking risks. I cannot do that without being willing to lose everything. This is the moment when Cleopatra's ambitions reached their peak. She wasn't just ruling Egypt anymore. She wasn't just managing an alliance with Rome. She was trying to reshape the entire Mediterranean world. She was trying to create a new order where Egypt and the East would be dominant, where her family would rule, where her vision would triumph. It was audacious. It was brilliant. It was also incredibly risky. She was playing for the highest stakes imaginable. She was betting not just her own future, but the future of her children, the future of Egypt, the future of the entire Eastern Mediterranean. And she did it with full awareness of what she was risking. She wasn't naive. She wasn't blinded by love or ambition. She understood the stakes. She understood the dangers. She understood that she might lose everything. But she also understood something else. She understood that sometimes you have to risk everything for something that matters. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose in order to have a chance at winning. Sometimes you have to commit fully to your vision, even when the odds are against you. That's what Cleopatra did. She committed. She risked. She fought for her vision of the East. And in doing so, she set in motion the events that would lead to the final chapter of her story. It came in 31 BCE, the Battle of Actium. It was a naval battle fought off the coast of Greece between the forces of Antony and Cleopatra on one side and Octavian's fleet on the other. It was supposed to be the decisive moment. It was supposed to be where Antony and Cleopatra proved that they could defeat Octavian, that their vision of an Eastern Empire could become reality. But something went wrong. The details are unclear. Historians have debated them for centuries. Some say that Cleopatra's fleet panicked and fled. Some say that Antony made a tactical error. Some say that Octavian's forces were simply better prepared, better trained, better led. Whatever the reason, the battle was a disaster. Antony and Cleopatra's forces were defeated. Their dreams of the victory crumbled. Cleopatra felt the shock of loss. She felt the moment when everything changed, when the future she had been building collapsed in an instant. She felt the weight of knowing that she had risked everything and lost. She felt the fear of what came next. She knew this is not how it was supposed to end. We were supposed to win. We were supposed to build an empire. We were supposed to create a new order in the Mediterranean. But we didn't. We lost. And now I have to figure out how to survive what comes next. After Actium, Cleopatra and Antony retreated to Egypt. Octavian pursued them. He was determined to finish what he had started. He was determined to eliminate the threat that Cleopatra and Antony represented. He was determined to take control of Egypt and consolidate his power over the entire Roman world. Cleopatra faced an impossible situation. She had lost her military advantage. She had lost the support of many of her allies. She was trapped in Alexandria with Octavian's forces closing in. She had to make a choice, surrender or fight to the end, but there was another option. There was betrayal. Some of Antony's generals and supporters began to negotiate with Octavian. They began to abandon Antony, to switch their allegiance to the winning side. It was the ancient world's version of rats leaving a sinking ship. Antony felt the sting of betrayal. He felt the collapse of everything he had built. He felt the despair of knowing that his dream was over. And in his despair, he made a tragic decision. He believed incorrectly that Cleopatra had betrayed him. He believed that she had made a deal with Octavian. He believed that she had abandoned him. In his grief and despair, Antony took his own life. He fell on his sword. And Cleopatra, learning of his death, felt the devastation of losing the man she loved. She felt the guilt of knowing that he had died, believing she had betrayed him, when in fact she had remained loyal. She felt the weight of his death on her shoulders. She knew, he is gone. The man I loved, the man I fought beside the man I built a future with, he is gone. And he died thinking I had abandoned him. I cannot undo that. I cannot bring him back. I can only face what comes next. Now Cleopatra was alone. She was facing Octavian with no army, no allies, no hope of military victory. She had only one thing left herself: her intelligence, her dignity, her refusal to be broken. Octavian came to Alexandria. He came to take Egypt. He came to take Cleopatra. And Cleopatra made a decision about how she would face him. She would not beg. She would not grovel. She would not accept humiliation. She would face him as a queen. The exact details of what happened next are lost to history. What we know is that Cleopatra and Octavian negotiated. She tried to convince him to spare her children. She tried to negotiate for Egypt's independence. She tried to maintain her dignity in the face of defeat. But Octavian was not interested in negotiation. He was interested in victory. He was interested in taking Egypt and making it part of his empire. He was interested in eliminating any threat to his power. She felt the finality of defeat. She felt the knowledge that there was no way out, no way to win, no way to save everything she had fought for. She felt the acceptance that this was the end, but she also felt something else. She felt the determination that she would not give Octavian the satisfaction of seeing her humiliated. She felt the resolve that she would not be paraded through Rome as a prisoner, as a trophy of war. She felt the decision that she would choose her own ending. She knew, I have lived as a queen. I have ruled Egypt. I have built an empire. I have loved and been loved. I have fought for my vision and my people, and I will not end as a prisoner. I will not end as Octavian's captive. I will end on my own terms. I will end with my dignity intact. Now here's where the legend and the reality diverge. The legend says that Cleopatra died from the bite of an asp, a sacred Egyptian snake. The legend says that she held the snake to her breast and let it bite her, choosing death rather than capture. It's a beautiful story. It's poetic. It's the kind of ending that would appeal to storytellers and romantics, but the reality might have been different. Some historians believe that Cleopatra died from poison. Some believe that Octavian allowed her to choose her own death as a final act of respect. Some believe that she died in captivity, that the ASP story was invented later to give her death more meaning, more dignity, more power. The truth is, we don't know exactly how she died. What we do know is that she died in 30 BCE in Alexandria after Octavian had taken control of Egypt. What we do know is that she chose not to live as Octavian's prisoner. What we do know is that she maintained her dignity to the very end. She felt the peace of knowing that she had done everything she could. She felt the acceptance of her fate. She felt the knowledge that her story would live on, that people would remember her, that her legacy would endure. She knew, I am not just a woman who lost a battle. I am a woman who lived with courage and intelligence. I am a woman who ruled an empire. I am a woman who loved and fought and dreamed of something greater. And even though I am losing, even though my vision is not coming to pass, I am leaving behind something that matters. I am leaving behind a story. I am leaving behind a legacy. And that will have to be enough. And it was enough. Because even though Octavian won the battle, even though he took Egypt and made it part of his empire, Cleopatra's story survived. Her intelligence survived. Her courage survived. Her refusal to accept defeat survived. and that in the end was her true victory. So here we are at the end of Cleopatra's story. She's gone. Egypt has become a Roman province. Octavian has won. The Eastern Empire she dreamed of building has dissolved. Everything she fought for, everything she sacrificed for is gone. But something remarkable happened. Her story didn't end with her death. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. Because Cleopatra left behind something more valuable than an empire. She left behind wisdom. She left behind lessons about what it means to lead, what it means to survive, what it means to be a woman in a world that doesn't believe women should have power. Let me tell you what I think her life teaches us. First, there's this fundamental lesson about the difference between power and wisdom. Power is the ability to make things happen. It's the ability to command armies, to control resources, to make decisions that affect other people's lives. Cleopatra had power. She was a pharaoh. She ruled one of the richest nations in the ancient world. But wisdom is something different. Wisdom is understanding. It's knowing not just what to do, but why to do it. It's understanding people. It's understanding consequences. It's understanding yourself. And Cleopatra had wisdom in abundance. She understood that she couldn't rule Egypt alone. She understood that she needed allies. She understood that the best way to get those allies wasn't through force, but through intelligence and connection. She understood that the most powerful weapon she had wasn't her army or her wealth. It was her mind. Think about how she used that mind. She learned 9 languages. Why? Because she understood that communication is power. She understood that when you can speak to someone in their own language, when you can understand their culture, when you can see the world from their perspective, you have an advantage. You have the ability to connect with them in a way that others can't. She studied mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and rhetoric. Why? Because she understood that knowledge is power. She understood that a ruler who understands the world, who can think clearly about complex problems, who can articulate her vision in compelling ways is more effective than a ruler who simply inherits a throne. She built relationships carefully and strategically. Why? Because she understood that power is ultimately about people. It's about who believes in you, who supports you, who will stand with you when things get difficult. She understood that the most valuable resource in the world isn't gold or armies. It's trust. She made difficult decisions. She eliminated threats. She did things that were ruthless and sometimes cruel. Why? Because she understood that leadership sometimes requires you to do things that are hard, things that you don't want to do, things that might make people uncomfortable. She understood that being a good leader doesn't mean being nice. It means being effective. It means being willing to do what's necessary to protect what matters. She loved Antony genuinely, but she didn't let love cloud her judgment. She supported him. She fought beside him. She believed in him. But she also kept her eyes open. She also maintained her own power base. She also made sure that if things fell apart, she would have options. She understood that love and strategy don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can love someone and also be realistic about the challenges you face together. And perhaps most importantly, she understood something about sacrifice. She understood that leadership requires you to give up things. She gave up the luxury of a normal life. She gave up the ability to simply be a woman, to have private feelings, to make decisions based purely on emotion. She gave up the possibility of a quiet, peaceful existence. She sacrificed all of that for Egypt, for her vision, for her legacy. But here's the thing about sacrifice that people often miss. It's not about suffering. It's not about being a martyr. It's about choosing what matters most and being willing to give up other things to achieve it. Cleopatra chose power and legacy over comfort and safety, and she did it with her eyes open. She understood what she was giving up. She understood the cost, and she decided it was worth it. Now let's talk about what it means to be a woman in a man's world, because that's really what Cleopatra's story is about. She lived in a world where women weren't supposed to have power. She lived in a world where women were supposed to be decorative, ornamental, useful for producing heirs, but not for making decisions. She lived in a world where a woman's value was primarily based on her beauty and her ability to bear children. And Cleopatra rejected that world. She refused to accept those limitations. She insisted on being taken seriously as a ruler, as a thinker, as a strategist. She insisted on having a voice in the decisions that affected her life and her country. But here's what's important to understand. She didn't do this by trying to be like men. She didn't try to become masculine or adopt masculine values. She did it by being fully herself. She used her intelligence. She used her charm. She used her understanding of people. She used her femininity when it was useful, and her authority when it was necessary. She was strategic about how she presented herself, but she was always authentically herself. She felt the constant tension of being a woman in power. She felt the awareness that she had to be better than the men around her, had to be smarter, had to work harder, had to be more careful. She felt the frustration of living in a world that didn't believe women should rule. She felt the determination to prove them wrong. She knew, I am a woman. That is not a weakness. That is not a limitation. That is simply who I am. And I will use everything I am, my intelligence, my charm, my femininity, my strength to build the life I want and to lead my people effectively. I will not apologize for being a woman. I will not try to be something I'm not. I will be the best version of myself, and that will be enough. And that's the wisdom that Cleopatra left behind, not just for women, but for everyone. The wisdom that your greatest strength isn't what you're born with. It's what you make of yourself. It's your intelligence. It's your determination. It's your willingness to learn to grow, to adapt, to take risks. The wisdom that power without wisdom is dangerous, but wisdom without power is useless. You need both. You need the ability to make things happen, and you need the understanding of why you should make those things happen. The wisdom that leadership is about people. It's about understanding them, connecting with them, inspiring them. It's about being willing to sacrifice for something larger than yourself. The wisdom that you don't have to choose between being authentic and being strategic. You can be both. You can be genuine and also calculated. You can love someone and also protect yourself. You can be soft and also strong. Cleopatra lived these lessons. She embodied them. And even though she lost the final battle, even though Octavian defeated her, even though her empire crumbled, those lessons survived. Those lessons are still here, thousands of years later, still teaching us something important about what it means to lead, what it means to survive, what it means to be human. As you're lying there, as your eyes are getting heavier, as you're drifting towards sleep, I want you to hold on to something. Hold on to the idea that Cleopatra's story isn't just about ancient Egypt. It's not just about a beautiful queen who seduced powerful men. It's about something much deeper. It's about what happens when someone refuses to accept the hand they've been dealt. Think about her journey. She was born into a family that didn't want her. She was forced from her throne. She was exiled, hunted vulnerable. And instead of giving up, instead of accepting defeat, she used those years of exile to become stronger. She learned. She planned. She prepared. And when the moment came, she was ready. That's a lesson for all of us. Your struggles aren't wasted. Your difficult moments aren't meaningless. They're preparing you for something. They're making you stronger. They're teaching you things you need to know. Cleopatra understood that. She understood that exile wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of her real education. And then there's the lesson about intelligence. Cleopatra's greatest weapon wasn't her beauty. It wasn't her wealth. It wasn't her armies. It was her mind. She spoke 9 languages. She studied mathematics and astronomy. She understood people. She thought strategically. And that intelligence allowed her to survive in a world that was trying to destroy her. In our world, in your world, that's still true. Your intelligence is your greatest asset. Your ability to think clearly, to understand people, to learn new things, to adapt to changing circumstances, that's what will carry you through. That's what will allow you to build the life you want. And finally, there's the lesson about dignity. Even at the very end, when everything had been taken from her, when she had lost the battle and the man she loved, and her empire, Cleopatra maintained her dignity. She refused to be humiliated. She refused to accept a future as a prisoner. She chose her own ending. She maintained control over the one thing that couldn't be taken from her, her own story, her own narrative, her own dignity. That's something to remember as you drift off to sleep. No matter what happens in your life, no matter what challenges you face, no matter what you lose, there's one thing that can never be taken from you. Your dignity, your ability to choose how you respond, your ability to maintain your integrity, your ability to tell your own story. Cleopatra's empire is gone. Her dynasty ended. Egypt became a Roman province. But her story survived. Her wisdom survived. Her example survived. And that's a kind of immortality that's more valuable than any empire. So as you close your eyes tonight, as you let yourself drift towards sleep, remember Cleopatra. Remember that she was a woman who used her intelligence to survive impossible odds. Remember that she loved deeply and fought fiercely. Remember that she maintained her dignity even in defeat. Remember that her story, like your story, matters. You're doing the best you can. You're facing your own challenges with courage. You're learning and growing and becoming stronger. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Sleep well. Rest easy. You've earned it. And tomorrow you'll wake up and continue your own story, your own journey, your own quest to become the person you're meant to be, just like Cleopatra did.